Breashears, and I've reached the summit of Mount Everest 4 times. During my third ascent of Mount Everest in 1996, I was the expedition leader, the co-producer, the director, and the director of photography for the IMAX Everest filmmaking team. I would like to tell you a story about one of the greatest achievements in the history of filmmaking, about a team that persevered high on the slopes of Mount Everest in 1996 against all odds. It's a story of courage, professionalism, dedication of purpose, camaraderie, but most of all, it's a story about a triumph of the human spirit.
The top of the world, where the wind is fiercest, is a desolate, deathly place where humans cannot live. Every breath burns the lungs like cold fire. Many have died there on the mountain known as Everest.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here and breathing the thick, humid air in Orlando, Florida. Talk about going to the top of Mount Everest. We're going to do what's never been done before. We're going to climb Mount Everest in about 35 minutes. Here with my slideshow. But before we get started, I think I'll just set the scene a little bit for you and tell you a little bit about what we're going to see. I was the leader and director of photography of our Everest IMAX team in 1996, and we were one of 12 teams on the mountain that year. That was a big change for me because when I first went to Mount Everest in 1981, we were the only team on that side of the mountain. And I hadn't been on the summit of Everest since 1985. I had climbed Mount Everest twice before I decided to try and make this film. And that brings me to the point here of why did we make this film? I was a climber first. I'd spent years developing the skills and having had this apprenticeship so I could go off to the Himalayas and bring back these hard-won images that some of you sometimes see on television. But I had never been offered the opportunity to bring you back images of Mount Everest that could show you what it's really like up there. And for those of you that have ever seen an IMAX screen or an OmniMax film, you know that the images are very big and they are designed to take you there. We were working so hard all of those years to bring you back images you were seeing on a little 15 or 16 or 20-inch television screen, and I can assure you that the world's tallest peak, Mount Everest, 29,028 feet high, does not fit very well on a 22-inch TV screen. But there was a lot involved in bringing back those big images. You've heard maybe a lot about Everest from Into Thin Air, John Krakauer's wonderful book. But in the midst of all of that kind of a big mess that happened that year was a team of dedicated professionals who got over 200 pounds of camera equipment to the top of the world. And let me remind you as we watch this slideshow, and I can tell you a little bit about our team there behind the camera, that high on Mount Everest, we cut our toothbrushes in half to save weight. And I can remember the 4 times I've left the high camp to go to the top in a sleep-deprived, hypoxic, dehydrated, malnourished state, lying there in a tent trying to decide, do we take one 35-millimeter film cassette or 2? You see, ounces and half ounces matter on Everest, and we were going to try to get to the top with a 42-pound camera. I mentioned to you we had almost 200 pounds of gear. Well, it takes a lot to run a camera like that. Another thing to keep in mind before I get started is that the camera I use uses 500 feet of film, a big disc like that. It's about that thick. It's 70-millimeter film. It weighs 4.5 pounds. But on Mount Everest in IMAX, 500 feet of film, 4.5 pounds of film, lasts 90 seconds. because that camera uses 5.6 feet of film per second. One other real challenge of working with that camera on Everest was I had to load the camera barehanded. Just putting your hands into a steel box in minus 30 or minus 35, because we couldn't afford to have one little bit of lint get in the gate of that camera, because on an 80-foot high screen, it looks like a boa constrictor up there. But I'm going to have to, the slideshow is going to be a little faster than I'm used to giving it, and I'll just start leaving you with one thought. The only reason we could have done what we did was not only because we had a team of talented professionals, highly skilled individuals, it's because we were trying to do something we didn't know we could do. And I call that the motivation of uncertainty. And if you have the right people on your team, they rise to that kind of challenge. It brings out the best in people. It helps people achieve things they don't really think they were capable of. There's really no point, I think, in life in just going out and doing what you know you can do. We knew technically it was possible to get this camera to the top and get it to work. But in the end, you're relying on the human spirit to make it all happen. The human spirit in a year when 8 people died in one night. So think of Everest as not in IMAX as not a technological achievement, but a triumph of a human spirit, and something that people only did because they didn't know they could do it. And every day for 90 days, we went out wanting to prove to ourselves that we could do something we didn't think we could do. So now I'm going to get started, and we're going right up